Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me today. It's now gorgeous in the Northeast in New York. I'll tell you, the weather has changed. Spring is in full effect. And I want to make sure that if you are not already a subscriber, make sure that you follow and subscribe to this podcast so that you don't miss an episode. Also, visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with others. There's a lot going on in the United States. You have a lot of people that are intent on dividing us as a country. And today we're diving into a critical and disturbing topic. And it's President Biden's strategy to divide America for political gain. This isn't just a matter of partisan politics. It's actually a strategy that exists, and it has deep implications for the future of our nation. So in this episode, I'm going to uncover how President Biden and his administration want to label nearly half the country, especially those who dissent from leftist policies, as radical extremists, domestic terrorists. But it's even worse than that, because I want to set the stage here. Over the weekend, you had President Biden give a speech at Morehouse College addressing Black Americans graduating from college after years of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. This is supposed to be a joyous occasion. Commencement speeches are supposed to be uplifting. I mean, this is a major accomplishment for these young adults who have done a lot over 4 or 5 years in order to get their college degrees. They're now embarking on their careers. A commencement speech should be filled with hope and promise, as these young Americans have so much opportunity. And when you're that young, you should be optimistic, right? The world is supposed to be your oyster. You could accomplish anything. But in President Biden's speech, he made some very pointed comments that seemed less about celebrating the achievements about these Americans, and it was more about stoking division. He claimed that his political opponents don't see Black Americans in the future of America, and that a Black man loves his country even if his country doesn't love him back. These remarks are part of a broader pattern that we've seen from this administration. It's a deliberate effort to break us down into groups, to pit Americans against each other, all based on race, political beliefs, and social values. And it's dangerous because it's much bigger than just one speech, one commencement address. As we move forward in this episode, I'm going to be playing sound clips of the speech, pointing to documents that illustrate that this isn't just a one-time off-the-cuff remarks that he made, that this is an agenda. And we'll look at specific examples of how dissent is being labeled as extremism and how that impacts ordinary Americans who simply want to exercise their rights to free speech and assembly, who simply are dissatisfied with the leadership of this administration. They're dissatisfied with how America has changed over the last several decades, that the children of today are not growing up in the America that we grew up in, where we may have disagreed on political issues, but there was a certain love of country that did exist. There was an understanding of what is the American identity. There was an appreciation for the American political concepts like liberty and freedom. Today, they're trying to do away with all that. And that's what I want to focus on, the broader implications for our republic and what we can do to push back against this divisive strategy. Too many Americans have tuned out this type of rhetoric. But it's important that we pay attention to it, right? We see the ugliness. We saw the ugliness last week with the catfight in Congress between Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. We saw it. Take a listen.
Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about AG.
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No, ain't nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Order. Mr. Chairman,
That's beneath even
the order of your committee.
Order.
Point of order. And I would like to move to take down Ms. Green's words. That is
absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Are your
Move
feelings hurt?
her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Baby girl? I don't think
We are going to
so.
move, and we're going to take your words down.
I
Thank you very
second that motion.
You agree to strike your words?
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
agree.
Ms. Green agrees to strike her words.
I believe she
Chair
should
recognizes
apologize. No,
Mr.
she
Perry.
should apologize.
Okay, hold on. Then after Mr. Perry's going to be recognized, then Ms. Green
I'm not
has 4 minutes and
apologizing.
21
Well,
seconds.
then
Okay,
you're
reserve
not
the right to
striking your
object.
words.
I am
Mr.
not
Perry.
apologizing.
Now let's go.
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
Chairman, I make a motion to strike those words.
I don't think that's
Hold
a
on.
parliament.
I played that clip for 2 reasons. First of all, I'm someone that believes members of Congress are supposed to uphold themselves and conduct themselves in a way that shows professionalism. I mean, they're members of Congress. They're representing us. They need to show that they have dignity, that they have integrity, that they respect the institutions that they're serving in. Unfortunately, though, we see this rhetoric all too often now, and it's largely because there isn't a mutual respect between each other. And when you demonize people as evil, when you pull the Maxine Waters and tell Americans to get into the face of other Americans, this is the result of that. Now, it's Congress, so I do take what happens there with a grain of salt, and I don't want to pretend that this is something new in Congress. We've seen harsh rhetoric before. In fact, we tend to have a nostalgic view. People are like, oh, it's shameful what Congress has become. Meanwhile, most people don't know history, where in the 1830s, you had 2 members of Congress, can't recall the names off the top of my head, but they engaged in a duel with each other, and one of them ended up dying. He was from Maryland. And then I think it was a year or so later, another member of Congress pulled a knife on a member of Congress. We had Charles Sumner almost beaten to death on the Senate floor in the 1850s. And politics has always been brutal. It's always been a blood sport. But something is different now. And what I mean by that is, in today's day and age, there's not much that connects us together. We're isolated. And we live in America at a time where most Americans know little about the country. They know little about our founding, our values. They know little about the American identity. And the point is that you cannot defend what you don't know. See, you have the Biden administration that uses people's ignorance about America to divide us even further, to break us down into these groups. And when I say divide us further, I am not talking about dividing us on the political issues. I've harped and harped on this podcast that in a free society, there is always going to be division on political issues. That's the nature of a free society. If you want unity, go to North Korea, go to Communist China, go to Saudi Arabia. That's where you see unity. In free societies, you don't see that. We're always going to have disagreement on political issues. What I'm talking about is something much deeper. It's dividing us into a group mentality, tribalism. Tribalism that makes us suspicious of one another. So don't go anywhere. This is an episode you won't want to miss, and we'll be back after this quick break. Welcome back, everyone. So the first thing I want to do is play some sound clips of the president's speech at Morehouse College. I want to break them down even further, and we're going to start with the division through rhetoric, because the Biden administration often frames their political opponents not as just wrong, but morally and fundamentally evil. However, when you listen to these sound clips, I want you to ask, well, what's really evil here? Is it disagreement on political issues? Or is it trying to pit Americans against each other? Because during his speeches and public statements, Biden has repeatedly used inflammatory language that paints a stark divide between us and them mentality. A lot of people want to blame the former president for the current political environment in which we live. However, understand that this existed long before President Trump came on the political scene. Just take a listen to this clip from 2012 when President Biden told a black audience, well, listen for yourselves. You don't need me to tell you.
Look at what they value and look at their budget and what they're proposing. Romney wants to he said in the first 100 days, he's going to let the big banks once again write their own rule. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
So that was 2012. That was President Biden speaking to a black audience, telling them that Republicans are going to put them back in chains, that they're going to bring them back to slavery. So you cannot blame the former president, President Trump, on Biden's statement from 2012. And you certainly can't blame Biden's recent statements on the former president. And again, remember, President Biden made the appeal. The media told us that, well, this is the adult in the room, that we're bringing back normalcy to the White House, not someone that's going to punch down and attack everyone. Here's the thing. President Trump does punch down, and a lot of times it's not worth his time. Why he does it, I can't answer that question. However, he doesn't try and attack large segments of the population and pit the segments against each other. So look at President Biden's recent address at Morehouse College. He made statements, and they could only be interpreted as suggesting that those who oppose him and his policies are inherently racist or bigoted. And this kind of language, it's not just divisive, it's dangerous. It creates an enemy out of fellow citizens, which can lead not only to increased polarization, it leads to detachment from society, and then it ultimately turns into violence. So take a listen to this first clip.
Well, let's be clear. What happens to you and your family when old ghost in new garments seize power?
So I just want to interrupt for a minute, because when he talks about old ghost in new garments, what he's talking about is the KKK. And essentially, he's equating his political opponents that they no longer wear the white robes and the white pillowcases on their head, that they're just dressed differently. But the KKK is alive and well in his political opposition. Truly disgusting. But here's the full sound clip I want you to listen to.
Well, let's be clear. What happens to you and your family when old ghost in new garments seize power? Extremists come for the freedoms you thought belonged to you and everyone. Today in Georgia, they won't allow water to be available to you while you wait in line to vote in an election. What in the hell's that all about? I'm serious. Think about it. And then the constant attacks on black election workers who count your vote. Insurrectionists who storm the Capitol with Confederate flags are called patriots by some. Not in my house. Black police officers, black veterans protecting the Capitol were called another word, as you'll recall. They also say out loud, these other groups, immigrants poison the blood of our country, like the grand wizard and fascists said in the past. But you know and I know, we all bleed the same color. In America, we're all created equal. Extremists close the doors of opportunity, strike down affirmative action, attack the values of diversity, equality, and inclusion.
When I listen to that, here's the thought that goes through my mind.
Everything that guy just said is bull. Thank you.
You gotta love the great Vincent LaGuardia Gambini. But all of it was BS. All right, the whole Georgia water thing, the Georgia voting law, and that people can't get water, that's a lie. All the law said was third parties can't provide it. They can't give you a full meal and water when you're sitting there going to vote. That's called electioneering, and you could sit there and try and manipulate votes. And so you could either bring your own water or it'll be distributed by the actual voting place. So it's been completely debunked, but he'll keep spouting it out because they don't care about the lies. Remember, this is a president after the Georgia voting law was passed, where voter ID is required, and it made some changes to how the drop boxes are used and voter verification. This is the president that went down there and screamed that this was the new segregation, that this is worse than Jim Crow. It's Jim Eagle. Since that law has been passed, we've had a couple elections over in Georgia, and guess what happened? Voter turnout actually increased. More people are actually going out to vote. So it was just a lie. But there were more important things in what he was saying. When he said that the black police officers had the M-word hurled at them during January 6th. Well, I haven't seen any videos of that happening, and we have thousands upon thousands of hours of videos, and yet we haven't seen any videos of that happening. And it's amazing how this guy completely, and not just him, the entire Democrat Party lately has completely and thoroughly destroyed any type of respect for law enforcement. There's no respect for authority because of the stupid defund the police movement. They criticize law enforcement each and every turn they get, and all we have to do, he's sitting there talking about how black police officers, the M-word was hurled at them. Again, I Have not seen any video evidence. Maybe it did happen. But here's what he really thinks about the police. Take a listen to this.
If black men are being killed in the street, we bear witness. For me, that means to call out the poison of white supremacy. Root out systemic racism. I stood up for George Floyd's family to help create a country. We don't need to have that talk. Your son or grandson get pulled over.
So he says black men are being killed in the streets because of white supremacy, which, again, isn't true. That's not happening. We are seeing black men killed in the streets, but it's happening by other black men. We have to be honest by that. And it's actually not men. A lot of it is actually young kids. It's teenagers. It's young adults. And so let's acknowledge that. But he says black men are killed in the streets, and then he immediately invokes George Floyd. So he's making it as if the black men that are dying in the streets, it's not by other black men, it's by the police, that the police are a bunch of white supremacists that are simply gunning down black people. Imagine what type of human being goes to a black audience and just knowingly pushes this lie. And you're only doing it for one reason. You're doing it for incitement, which is an interesting word, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you see the intent behind the words. And again, President Biden doesn't write his own speeches. President Biden just simply says what the words say on the teleprompter. So his speechwriters, whoever they are, should be certainly fired for writing this speech and several other speeches, but it also went through the hands of the chief of staff. It's not like the president goes out there, gives these speeches without any senior level people reading these over. And it didn't end there. There was actually more, so take a listen.
I never thought when I was graduating in 1968, as your honoree just was, we talked about, I never thought I'd be a president at a time when there's a national effort to ban books, not to write history, but to erase history. They don't see you in the future of America, but they're wrong. To me, we make history, not erase it.
Again, this is lies, right? There's no books actually being banned. There's books being removed from school libraries, and in particular, pornographic books removed from school libraries. There's no books being banned. If parents want their children to read these books, they could easily go on Amazon and order them. These are not books that are appropriate for children, and so they lie with the whole book ban thing. There hasn't been a single black book that's been banned. There hasn't been a single book that focuses on black leaders, black history, that has been banned. It's pornographic material that's been removed from libraries. And we're talking about school libraries, not public libraries. In any event, the key phrase in that sound clip that we need to focus on is when he said, "They don't see you in a future of America." Now, how is that black audience supposed to take that? Now, many of them could just chalk it up and just be like, all right, there's an old guy that's talking. We're not even paying attention at this point in the speech anymore because we're bored. And we just want to get our diplomas and go celebrate. But realistically, when he's saying that they don't want to see you in a future of America, he is fostering hatred of each other. There's not a single person that I know that says that black people are not going to be part of a future America. Not a single one. The reality is that this is an administration, this is a party that now wants to stoke division and fear that they're going to be exterminated, that a group of people are going to be exterminated because they don't want to see them in a future of America. How is that for unity? Well, it's not, obviously. And that's part of the problem. But I saved the best one for last that I want to play. Take a listen to this one.
You missed your high school graduation. You started college just as George Floyd was murdered, and there was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? The trail of broken promises still leave black communities behind. What is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot. And most of all, what does it mean, as we've heard before, to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure?
Imagine telling a bunch of graduates that just worked hard, they got their degrees, they're about to go embark on careers, go through the job searches, and you have a president of the United States telling them, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you earned. It Doesn't matter how hard you tried, the hard work and the dedication that you put in, it's irrelevant. You better be 10 times better than everyone else. Otherwise, you're going to be the victim. You're not going to get ahead in life. You're not going to be able to achieve because the white people are going to hold you down. Again, what the hell is that? Who speaks like that? Who says that? We got to stop pretending that this is 1920s America here, where the KKK is at their height of power, where they have 4 million members in a population of 129 million people, where they held high-level positions as judges and lawyers and police chiefs. This isn't the 1920s. The KKK is a marginal group. Anyone that sees them will laugh at them. They're pathetic. They're pathetic. It's why their ranks, we're a country of 350 million people, and their ranks are estimated to be between 4,000 and 6,000 members. These people are losers. Nobody cares about them. Okay, the reality is that the system has made great strides. It's been the bureaucracy that pushed forth with civil rights. Things were improving. We saw our flaws from the very beginning of this country, from the very founding. We understood the flaws that existed. There were debates that took place about slavery. There were debates that took place when segregation was implemented. People disagreed with it. Slavery would not have ended had it not been for Union soldiers of the North fighting with the South. Segregation would not have ended had it not been for whites and blacks joining together in lockstep to push for civil rights. And yet this idiot wants to go out there and tell them that no matter how hard they work, they're not going to be able to achieve unless they're 10 times better. It's disgraceful. It's shameful. And then he also says that black people love their country even though their country doesn't love them back. Well, if you keep on telling black people that everything's against them, that the entire system is there to hold them down, how are they going to love the country? How are they going to appreciate a country that's holding them down? Well, they're not. It really is stunning. It's remarkable that he would go out there and even give this speech. And then he preaches about democracy, right? That democracy hasn't worked for black people, that democracy is against black people. This is the same president that claims he wants to save democracy. Well, if democracy has been a tool of injustice against people, particularly black people, well, then why would you want to save that? Are you the racist? So he undermines this entire idea of democracy and democratic values because to Biden, it looks like democracy is inherently racist. This goes far beyond pandering. This is not pandering to one audience. I want to make that clear. This is actually evil, what's being done. And I don't use that word lightly. You never really hear me say the word evil often on this podcast platform because I don't throw everything around as evil. And I'll take that up when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So when it comes to President Biden's speech at Morehouse College, there's only one conclusion that we could arrive at.
Everything that guy just said is bull. Thank you.
Again, I find Biden's rhetoric to be shameful. I find it to be evil. I find the whole intent of what they're looking to do as extraordinarily destructive. And we've seen this rhetoric throughout his entire administration, where he gave that dark speech. I won't play clips of it because I played enough clips of him. You don't need to hear him anymore. But where he gave that dark speech with the blood red background, the two Marines flanked on each side, talking about how half the country is essentially domestic terrorists, that they're the biggest extremists and that they're the biggest threat to this country since our founding. And that's what the real intent is. Let's be honest about it. It's not necessarily about one community over the other. It's about targeting political opposition. It's about targeting and labeling dissent as extremism. And we've seen how this administration, how its allies in the media talk about alternative viewpoints, talk about conservatives, how they target conservatives. If you disagree with the progressive policies on immigration, well, you're going to be labeled as xenophobic. If you question certain educational curriculums, DEI, you're branded as anti-education, you're branded as a racist, that you hate diversity, you hate inclusion, that you don't want every American to succeed because you are a racist. And it extends to labeling political opponents as domestic terrorists. We saw this with the school board memo that was issued through Merrick Garland, the Attorney General's Department of Justice. We saw this with the traditional Catholic memo that was done in the within the FBI to target Catholics, labeling them as domestic terrorists. We're seeing it time and time again. If you question gender ideology being pushed on kids, well, then you're transphobic and you want to see trans people die. If you question their approach to climate change, well, then you want to see the earth destroyed. You don't care about the earth and you want to kill human beings. You literally name the policy issue. You look at how they have labeled pro-life, people that are fighting for unborn babies, right? How they've labeled them as radical extremists. It's amazing. Now, I don't care whether you agree with pro-life or pro-choice. I don't care where anyone stands on the issue. But I'm not going to sit there and say how people that are fighting for unborn babies are horrible human beings. I mean, where the hell did we go so wrong that we're doing that? Where they celebrate abortions in the 9th month. I mean, it's clear what's going on. It's a clear attempt to intimidate and silence opposition by equating legitimate political dissent with radical extremism. They use words when talking about political opposition like purge and deprogram. In Hillary Clinton's case, she called for formal deprogramming of Trump supporters. Anyone that pushed back against coronavirus narratives was labeled as anti-science, telling little kids that they're going to be responsible if grandma and grandpa die, that it's their fault. Think about how horrible that is to do to children. And unfortunately, media, the big tech, they play a crucial role in amplifying what the Biden administration is trying to do. And not just the Biden administration. Remember, it goes far beyond Biden. I always want to make that clear. He's just a puppet. Okay, this goes to the heart of the bureaucracy, where you see the agenda, where you have major news outlets echoing the administration's talking points, the bureaucracy's talking points. They frame stories in a way that supports the narrative where people hate other people. People hate other groups. You have social media platforms who are quick to censor or shadow ban any type of dissenting opinions. Even today, I'm glad Elon Musk brought over Twitter and changed it to X, but conservatives are still being shadow banned. Their posts are innocuous, yet they're still being shadow banned. You have this idea of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation being weaponized to target dissent. And so we have this echo chamber that exists, where only one side of the story is being told, and unfortunately, you have a lot of dimwits out there that actually buy into it. I have people tell me today, oh, the city's not violent. There's not crime. That's just right-wing talking points. That's just, conservative talking points that the city is worse off today. No, crime is rampant. Oh, the border's not really open. That's just Republicans and conservatives exaggerating what's really going on. No, it's real. It's happening, and yet they don't believe it because they listen to these loons. They listen to the nefarious agenda, and it does have an impact on our nation because how can we achieve national unity if everything is based on pitting Americans against each other, pitting groups against each other? You cannot have national unity. And I will always say, this goes back to the beginning of the episode where I talk about how Americans tend to have an ignorance about America and what we stand for and what we're about. And that's the problem. It's not division on the political issues that's destroying this nation. It's that we've forgotten what unifies us. We don't know our country. We don't know our history. Therefore, we don't have an appreciation for it. And when you're being manipulated and told that your country is all based on slavery and racism, your country is based on all these evil sins, well, then why would anyone want to be loyal to that country? Why would anyone want to promote that country? Why would anyone be satisfied with that type of system? If a system is built on evil, that system must be destroyed and dismantled. It can no longer exist. And you have so many Americans today that really believe that all the founding fathers were just a bunch of rich old white slave owners. And that couldn't be further from the truth. By constantly emphasizing things like race, ethnicity, us against them, rather than what makes us all American, rather than the concept of e pluribus unum, out of many comes one. Out of many different people from the many different places comes one nation. Rather than promote that, rather than promote the idea that our founding fathers were flawed but brilliant men, that they were statesmen, that they sacrificed something. They created something bigger than themselves, that they weren't perfect, but what they were trying to achieve was exceptional. That's what we should be teaching. That's what Americans should be told. And that's why our political discourse has gotten so much worse, because it used to be that we would disagree on political opinions, but we all had a mutual respect and appreciation for our country, our founding, our history, and the Constitution. However, that ship has sailed. That no longer exists. And so now there's nothing that really ties us together. There's nothing that links us together as a society, and that's where the danger lies, because this divide and conquer approach, it might yield short-term political gains, but the long-term consequences for our country are devastating, devastating. And we risk becoming a nation of tribes that is unable to function together as a society. And that's what worries me. Now, I hope you found the content of this episode informative, and I implore you to share it with your friends and your family. Share it with those who disagree with you politically. It's a message that they really need to hear. And they're not going to like how I criticize Biden. They're not going to like how I call him an idiot, but I'm going to just call it as I say it. I'm not going to sit there and play nice when you have a guy that's telling a black audience that most of America or half of America doesn't want to see black people in the future of America. I'm not going to be nice about that. So share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. Leave the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating. Take 30 seconds to write a review. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.